whoever you are, impervious to ignominy, or mortified at your own mendacity. Hello. I remember an old uni friend of mine, a drama student, bragging that his degree was the best degree because, as an actor, he could perform any other qualification. This made his Bachelor of Arts a kind of super degree. I couldn't really tell if he was being serious or not. He was a fine actor. But the claim that he was making really got me thinking, and I clearly haven't stopped thinking about it. Here's the moral predicament that I found myself in. If a non-certified person could reliably fake a professional skill, would it matter? That is to say, if an uneducated layperson posing as a doctor consistently managed to fudge very good medical advice, would her patients feel betrayed if they found out? If a civilian in police uniform excelled at rounding up criminals, would society condemn their actions? Don't think too hard about this. The answers to these hypotheticals are obviously yes. But why? How come acting is a celebrated skill, whilst lying is a shameful sin? Oh, the answer is a good one. It seems, to me, that the distinction between acting and lying falls to the consent of an audience. We applaud gifted thespians because we appreciate how difficult acting is, but the performance is only welcome when we know in advance that we are being lied to. When we walk into a theatre, there is a mutual understanding that we're about to be witnessing a fictional performance, and we are willingly agreeing to participate by buying tickets. This is why the performing arts continue to provide popular and respectable fields of study, while lying classes have yet to earn public approval. It is strange, however, that lying comes so naturally to humans, whereas acting takes practice and study. Children lie to protect themselves as reflexively and convincingly as adults do. In contrast, acting is somehow deeper and more insidious, willfully conjuring a potpourri of emotions to conceal a person's true character. It is clear that natural selection has engineered certain emotions to meet our biological needs. Some environments that we might find ourselves in are conducive to survival and well-being, while others are truly miserable. It's the job of an animal's brain to guide the organism towards these agreeable situations while avoiding the crappiest ones. At least for sentient creatures, emotions are what guide us, like a metal detector sweeping for treasure. The ultimate prize are those environments that are predictable and cater for both our immediate and our ancient requirements. What do I mean by requirements exactly? An organism's most basic needs are known as the 4 Fs. These are feeding, fighting, fleeing, and sex. For most species, scoring an F in any situation is good enough. All our brains need to do is detect patterns in the environment. You don't need perfect information to infer a pattern and make a good decision. You just need enough information. And a sweeping conservative summary might just save your life. Spend too much time deliberating and an opportunity might disappear, or you could become a snack for some hungry something. You never did decide what it was. Truly intelligent animals, on the other hand, tend to spice things up a bit. Intelligence is a difficult thing to define, but I suspect that the concept is meaningless without some kind of prior goal. If we define intelligence as the effective application of knowledge and skills, that sort of smuggles in a requirement for intent. Undoubtedly, the 4Fs make excellent goals from a survival point of view, but they can't all be pursued at once, and they rarely come without obstacles. You can see the emerging dilemma. Let's break this down. As an animal can only commit its body to one goal at a time, and each goal must be paired with a realistic action plan, the brain has a lot to do. The faster a brain can work, by taking shortcuts without compromising on effectiveness, the more successful an organism is likely to be. But planning takes time. A series of sub-goals may need to be drawn up in advance, and there's always that hungry something waiting in the wings. To maximize reproductive success, an intelligent creature must comprehend its environment, experiment with different possibilities, and may need to secure the cooperation of others. This is certainly true of humans, and can be managed buffet-style rather than à la carte. Whatever options we're presented with on any particular occasion, our emotions are how our brains assign priorities to conflicting interests. You might be hungry and see a fruit tree full of delicious ripe fruit with a lion sleeping underneath it. You have some priorities to weigh up. How bad is your hunger? How likely are you to find another ripe fruit tree nearby? How confident are you that you can outrun a lion if the situation escalates? These are complicated questions with no easy answers, but what will manifest is a feeling of either courage to tiptoe past the lion and gorge yourself in the tree, or fear, which will send you as far from that tempestuous situation as possible. As we saw last episode, no one decides what emotions they feel. Emotions are pre-rational, a product of unconscious neural processes. Predictably, a few basic emotions have been preserved across a diverse range of animal groups. This is because many survival challenges are common to all creatures. You wouldn't be the first creature to have forsaken some delicious food through fear of being torn apart by a hungry predator. Complex organisms like mammals that can't feel fear are unlikely to survive and reproduce. Happiness is another bewilderingly useful emotion. To have scarpered in fear from the lion, only to discover another ripe fruit tree nearby, is bound to make you feel happy. The validation will no doubt play into future decisions when weighing up the pros and cons of a meal or death. An organism incapable of happiness wouldn't likely be motivated to do anything, so we'd expect a capacity for happiness to be quite common in the natural world. But what if you get to that second fruit tree only to discover that it's already occupied by a rival gang? In such cases, aggression motivates us to fight for our share. The fact that emotions like fear and aggression can be identified in other animals doesn't make them primitive. Quite the opposite. Ubiquity highlights an irreplaceable adaptive advantage. Far from overcoming these early emotions, humans seem to have simply repurposed them in some very sophisticated ways. From aggression, we get anger, jealousy, and hatred. It's from our animalistic fear that we get complex emotions like anxiety, guilt, dread, etc. These more advanced emotions, if I can call them that, have evolved to meet the challenges of living and reproducing within a social context. They are often triggered by other people more than they are by the environments we're in. Our actions during these encounters can then provoke emotional responses back. I'm sure you're well aware that the subtleties and complexities of emotional feedback loops take some serious brain power to keep track of. I've even heard it argued that the repertoire of emotions needed to support large cooperative, interacting social hierarchies could have been the driving force behind human brain evolution. So understanding where our emotions come from, biologically speaking, is quite important. Very quickly, reciprocal means two-way. Altruism means selflessness. So if you hear someone talk about reciprocal altruism and that strikes you as an oxymoron, it probably is. But try telling evolution that. Because the rewards that a social species gets from engaging in reciprocal altruism are practically limitless. The you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours philosophy has helped beavers build dams. Colonies of emperor penguins survive the frigid hell of Antarctica, and humans to organise charitable rock concerts, among other things. But to bring it back to basic biology, where does cooperation start? Who goes first? An intelligent individual would never go first. It's far too risky. You don't want to waste time scratching someone else's back, only to have them betray you and bugger off with all of your stuff. Luckily, before we reached the suspiciously scrupulous peak of our hard-won intellect, we had feelings to fall back on. Darwin defined evolution as descent with modification, and none of our modern emotions are exempt from this. All of them originated from earlier mechanisms of chemical signaling and neural wiring, with modifications. Take fear, again, for example. Good old fear. Once upon a time, it was an instructive safeguard against environmental dangers such as predators, cliff tops, and unfamiliar places. Now, fear is what motivates Homo sapiens to avoid social scrutiny, provocative insults, clowns, and losing our jobs. This is not a straight swap. We do still fear cliff tops, most of us. The old primal emotions are a persistent bunch, but many fears lurking from our ancestral past offer protection from dangers that no longer pose much of a threat, like arachnophobia, whilst at the same time they fail to highlight the real dangers in our environment: overloaded plug sockets. Even so, whether you fear snakes or abandonment, experiencing the full force of physiological terror does have a silver lining: relief. Relief helps us remember how we got out of a sticky situation, and implores us to take more care in the future. And the exhilaration that comes with relief can actually be a pleasurable pastime. Human beings routinely endure events that look and feel like real mortal dangers as a way of entertaining ourselves. It's this coaxing of real emotions from artificial situations that makes roller coasters and horror movies so uniquely pleasurable. I know, that's intelligence for you. Humans are whack, yo. I've been talking about how ancient emotions are often repurposed in an intelligent context, and how negative emotions often have a positive counterpart. But most of the emotions we've considered have operated on solitary individuals. To tie this back to acting and lying, we need to introduce a social environment. Just like with solitary emotions, social emotions too are in service of the 4 Fs. The behaviours that they provoke continue to suggest that sentient creatures will be happiest when healthy, well-fed, comfortable, safe, and non-celibate. But while this may seem stupefyingly obvious, it can't be the full picture in all cases. The interactions of social species, like wolves, whales, primates, and people, make additional demands. To be truly contented with our lot in life, to stand proudly on the peak of well-being, humans must also feel valued, respected, knowledgeable, successful, and loved. Communal living is the mixed blessing that necessitates a whole new spectrum of emotional flair. It is easy to imagine that this sets humanity apart from nature, as if human nature was not a part of natural nature. As Thomas Henry Huxley put it in his book back from 1893, Evolution and Ethics, quote, "The thief and the murderer follow nature just as much as the philanthropist." End quote. Even love, that most sacred of emotions, evolved for adaptive reasons, as I argued in episode 15. When we love someone, we feel pleasure in their well-being and pain when they are brought to harm. An animal that loves its offspring will experience a deep emotional commitment to their protection and flourishing. This may help them eke out a competitive advantage over other individuals who let their vulnerable descendants wander off alone. An animal partial to pair bonding, despite appealing alternatives, must experience something akin to love. Otherwise, why would they bother? But love is a strong word. Simply liking someone compels us to maintain an altruistic relationship with them. Empathy itself may have evolved as an emotional attractant to those most likely to return a favour. There is a wealth of evidence that shows that the limits of human altruism and the sacrifices that we're willing to make for it are modulated by the degree of relatedness, reciprocity, and common goals shared between individuals. This reinforces the idea that emotions like sympathy, compassion, pity, concern, and tenderness are simply genetic strategies that benefit identical genes in different bodies. If we didn't feel immediate gratitude towards those who assisted us, our helpers may feel that their kindness has been misplaced. I suspect the complex emotion gratitude owes its existence to the more basic emotion relief. Just as regret is probably a blend of emotional precursors like shame and sadness. Either way, communicating how grateful we are celebrates a willingness to return a backscratch. Altruism is investment. The more an act of generosity benefits us, and the more it costs the helper, the more grateful we ought to feel. With chemical feedback in place, people are bound to be more appreciative and beholden when they're most in need. It sounds pretty bleak, but desperate individuals present a golden opportunity to make one's altruistic acts go further. Suddenly, sympathy becomes a mechanism for securing gratitude, like a hot tip from the bookie. I appreciate all this talk of Machiavellian emotions and selfish genetic interests may be a little uncomfortable for some. It certainly casts human kindness in a rather unflattering light, and we'll return to this in a moment. But for now, we can't ignore how the most intense emotional responses can also serve to derail a person, not just benefit them. I'm sure you've noticed, individuals consumed by pride, grief, love, or rage are at risk of completely losing their self-control. Behavioural mediation and reasonable judgment go right out the window, and with good reason. It seems counterintuitive, but examples abound where knowledge, self-interest, options, power, and even open communication can be weaknesses rather than strengths. Is this a cognitive malfunction? A glitch in the system? Not at all. It's clear that the intellect has evolved to take its hands off the wheel in certain situations. Even when emotions act against our long-term well-being, they may still be advantageous. In a strategic contest, where your next move is calculated by anticipating an opponent's response, abandoning reason and limiting your options can be surprisingly effective tools. Here I actually get to quote Sun Tzu's Art of War, where he said, quote, "Throw your soldiers into positions whence there is no escape, and they will prefer death to flight. If they will face death, there is nothing they may not achieve." End quote. Maintaining social relationships demands countless negotiations, promises, and threats, but it's the reliable promise of a total loss of control that makes so-called doomsday emotions, like grief or rage, so threatening. Hints, insults, shouting, and flipping the bird will only get you so far. They may not represent true threats, as the flipper may be bluffing, but knowing that a person's heated emotion can and will take control of their actions makes the danger so credible. It's perhaps understandable then that anyone whose altruism has been deliberately exploited will experience wrath and a diminishment of their own sense of self-preservation. Such an inconsolable rage would be bad news for everyone. So to function as an effective deterrent against would-be cheaters, righteous anger must be spontaneous, malicious, potentially violent, and put a swift end to all current and future reciprocal arrangements. An emotional self-destruct switch would only be effective if it operated beyond the person's control. A blind rage persists despite spiraling costs to the wronged party. So we see how, to be an effective deterrent, doomsday emotions must be predictable, they must be publicly observable, and they must override all sensible negotiations. Imagine that you have lied. I know you would never, but hypothetically. Say you've taken advantage of someone. You've milked their kindness and disappeared into the night. The victim of your selfishness discovered what you did, curses you, and has told everyone in the village about it. You find yourself alone, friendless, powerless. What do? How do you feel? It stands to reason that a good way to start repairing this reputational carnage is to have a bit of shame. A public display of contrition would go a long way, and the sooner the better. This reflexive, emotional admission of wrongdoing shouldn't be optional. Good news! Shame and guilt are pre-programmed emotional responses to social transgressions. In future, our conscience will remind us what's at stake when considering whether to exploit, cheat, or lie to someone again. Now all that a well-seasoned, reciprocally altruistic society requires is for others to be eagerly watching, looking for guilty parties, ready to dispense justice on a victim's behalf. The social obligation to do this would work best if it was pre-programmed as well. If telltales received an intrinsic, positive internal emotional reward for blowing the whistle on others and discovering cheats, and cheaters knew it, the threat of being outed may be enough to put them off. Can you see where I'm going with this? Did you notice what just happened? From simple emotional precursors, through descent with modification, via stock standard group living, we have managed to evolve a system of morality, an inbuilt sense of right and wrong, completely independent of any rational decision. The social emotions endorsed by our specific evolutionary history create a visceral distinction between good and bad behavior. Any system of values and social conduct that we've subsequently adopted need not be divinely decreed or even objectively true to be felt. In fact, there is a specific emotion reserved for regarding immoral, deviant, transgressive acts. It's called disgust. This is a carbon copy of that same animalistic disgust that keeps us healthy and safe. We've upcycled this emotion and now find things disgusting in this broader moral context. And, mercifully, this brings us right back to where we started, with liars and acting. You see, once each of our emotions evolved, there would be an immediate biological incentive to mimic them artificially. By faking emotional reactions, we can better manipulate others, and sham friendships often buy genuine altruism in return. Crying crocodile tears, insincere expressions of remorse, may convince people that your naughtiness is over, despite any such intention. It's enough to make you sick, especially when you consider that to combat bogus emotions, selection pressures must have favoured the development of trust and distrust. Those are emotions too. We humans have grown highly sensitive to any inconsistencies in body language or behaviours that might betray a faker. Off the stage, the actors of this world, the artists, singers and comedians, are not so easily distinguished from the liars, crooks and thieves. Communities create a united front against fraudsters by gossiping, which allows opinions to be exchanged, pooled and verified. It's a community's insatiable taste for gossip that makes a person's reputation their most valuable asset. And what better way to defend and improve one's reputation than through conspicuous displays of altruism? The great philosopher Aristotle noted that anyone can become angry. Anger is the easy bit, but to be angry with the right person and to the right degree, at the right time and for the right purpose in the right way, that is not within everybody's power, and it is not easy. This may be why, at every point in our history, humans have preferred to communicate face to face rather than remotely. It seems we cannot trust a person, especially a stranger, without some way of reading their emotions. Gauging a person's authenticity is only possible due to the uncontrollable and intangible facial clues that come with genuine emotions. With expressive indicators and body language always assisting the side of good, self-deception may be the ultimate, unbeatable move. You've heard it 100 times. The best liars are those who believe their own lies. And it's true. Hiding things from yourself really is a watertight way of hiding them from other people. No wonder that the human mind has taken so readily to deceiving itself. Self-delusion may be unavoidable for an intelligent species. So remember, when considering those things that we do purely for other people, self-interest is best orchestrated off the record, outside of your conscious awareness. Next time you catch yourself acting compassionately, charitably, with no interest in self-gain, don't be too quick to dismiss the possibility that you might be lying to yourself. This was a cheery little exploration into some of the ways that humans are different from animals, but as we've seen, we're not. There are lots more traits that fall under the category of human exceptionalism that I shall discuss next episode, for those of us who enjoy kicking humanity off its pedestal. Humans are whack, yo!